Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. In today's tutorial, we're making the good old pineapple stitch with a bit of a twist for a quick chain top that's both modern and fancy. Speaking of, if you're a fan of fancy crochet makes, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of fancy yet easy to follow crochet tutorials and patterns with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 135 grams of yarn. That's 295 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us how you mainly watch TV shows, through the phone, computer, or TV. Mine would have to be half on the phone and half on TV, depending on how much recording I have to do. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5mm hook, and we're all going to get started with our pineapple detail first. We're all going to start by making an odd number chain, the length that we'd like for the base of the pineapple stitch to be, and it does need to be a minimum of 7. I'd like for mine to be just about 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 9. So now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch. So getting started on our first puff stitch, we're going to yarn over. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, we're going to insert, yarn over, and pull through. We should all have 3 loops on our hook, so yarn over, pull through 3. Then again, we're going to yarn over, into that same chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. To get 3 loops on our hook, then from here yarn over, pull through all 3, and that is our first puff stitch. Then from here we're going to chain 1, then into that same chain space with another puff stitch. So again, yarn over. Into that same chain we're going to insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, then yarn over, into that same chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, then yarn over, pull through 2. Now that is our first little set of stitches. Now what we're going to do from here is chain 1, then we're all going to put 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last 2. So yarn over, skip that following chain, into the next, insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. That is our first half double crochet. Let's do another one. Yarn over, into that following chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3, and continue this until we all have 2 chains left. Now we've made our way down. For those of you that have my numbers, I have a total of 5 half double crochets. Then what we're going to do from here is mirror the same thing that we did on this side. So we're going to start with a chain 1, skip that following stitch, and close off the row with our puff, chain 1, puff. So yarn over. Like I said, skip that following chain, and into the last chain into this row, we're going to pull through. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, same chain, pull through 2 for 3 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through 3 for our first puff, then chain 1, yarn over, insert your hook into that same last chain with a second puff. So insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, same last chain, pull through 2 for a total of 3 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through 3. Then right after that last puff stitch, just insert 1 double crochet into that same last chain. So insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now our row 1 is complete. From where we're at, we're all going to chain 3 and flip our work. Now to get started on our row 2, we're going to do another puff stitch, chain 1 puff stitch, but now working into the chain space in between our puff stitches. So starting with the yarn over, into that chain space, we're going to insert, pull through 2, again yarn over, insert, pull through 2 for 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through 3, then again, chain 1, into that same chain space, insert, pull through 2, yarn over, same chain space, pull through 2 for 3 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through 3. Then what we're going to do from here is chain 1. We're all going to put 1 double crochet into the first half double crochet that we have from our previous row. So yarn over. Into the top of that half double crochet, we're going to insert, pull through 2, pull through 2. Then from here, chain 1, yarn over into that next stitch with a double crochet. Again, chain 1 into that next stitch with a double crochet. And we're all going to continue doing this until we're worked into the top of that last half double crochet from our previous row. And just as a really quick tip, we should have the same amount of double crochets as half double crochets that we had from our previous row. So we've just made our way down with our double chain space double crochet until we're worked into the top of the half double crochet from our previous row. Now like I said, we should have the same amount of double crochets as half double crochets that we had from our previous row. So just to show you guys, I had a total of 5 half doubles. So I now have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochets for this row. Now from here, we're going to close off by starting with a chain 1. Into that chain space in between our puff stitches, we're going to again puff, chain 1, puff. So into that chain space, pull through 2, yarn over, same chain space, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 3, chain 1, and again yarn over, same chain space, pull through 2, yarn over, same chain space, pull through 2 for 3 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through 3. Now we always want to close off our rows with a double crochet, so yarn over, and into the top of the last stitch from our previous row, insert with 1 double crochet. Now everyone's row 2 is complete. Now to get started on our row 3, we're going to chain 3 and flip. And we're going to start with our same puff, chain 1 puff into our previous row's chain space. Now the row is always going to start and end with the same puff stitches that we've just done together, unless stated otherwise. So just to get this one done once more, yarn over into that chain space. Here is 1 puff stitch, chain space, and a second puff stitch all into that chain. Now what we're all going to do from here, once our puff stitch is completed, we're all going to chain 3. So here's 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to skip that following chain space and single crochet into that next chain space, so in between the first and second double crochet. So we're going to skip this one, the chain space in between the first double and the puff stitch, and into that next chain space, insert with 1 single crochet. Again, we're going to chain 1, 2, 3. Into that next chain space that we have, insert with a single crochet. Once more, 1, 2, 3. Into that next chain space, insert with a single crochet. We're going to continue to chain 3 and single crochet into that next chain space until we're worked into our last 2 double crochets. We are not going to be working into that chain space in between that last double and last puff stitch. But once we have made our way down to get started on our last puff stitch, we're all going to chain 1, 2, 3 into the chain space, puff, chain puff. And then once we have our puff, chain puff, always close off the row with 1 double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row. So we have all just completed our row 3, and our row 4 is going to be done pretty similarly, so let's get that started. Chain 3 and flip. Into that first chain space, puff, chain 1 puff. Once we have that puff, chain 1 puff, we're all going to chain 1, 2, 3. We are going to skip over that first chain 3 space that we have that's in between that single crochet and that puff, and into the top of that next chain 3 space or that loop, insert with a single crochet to connect. Again, chain 1, 2, 3 Into that next loop, insert with a single crochet. Continue to chain 3 and single crochet into that following loop until we're worked into our last loop, making sure that we're not working into that chain 3 space that's right before our puff stitches. Now once we're worked into that last loop, we're going to chain 3 again, and into the middle of that chain space, we're going to puff, chain 1, puff. Then once when that puff stitch is completed, 1 double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row, and now our row 4 is complete. So chain 3 and flip. So just to talk you guys through the following row, into our chain space in between our puffs, we're going to puff, chain 1, puff. And once we have that completed, chain 3, skip that following chain 3 space into the next with a single crochet, then chain 3, single crochet into that next chain 3 space, and continue that until we're worked into the last chain 3 space, making sure we're not working into that chain 3 space that's right before our puff stitches. Once we've connected into that last chain 3 space, we're going to chain 3 into our previous row's puff stitches chain space, puff, chain 1, puff, and close off the row with a double crochet. Now from here, we're going to continue to repeat our previous row. So as a refresher, into our puff chain space, we're going to puff, chain 1, puff, chain 3 into that following loop, insert with a single crochet, and then just continue to chain 3 and single crochet into the next loop, and then do our last puff, chain, puff, closing off the row with a double crochet. Now as you guys can see, each of our loops should be decreasing by just 1 loop. So as you guys can see, this one had 3, this one had 2, and this one has 1. I'll meet you guys back once we have just 1 left. But since I'm already here, what I'm going to do is chain 3 and flip. Always starting off the row with our puff, chain 1, puff. Then from here, we're going to chain 3 into that 1 loop that we have, 1 single crochet, chain 3, then into that puff chain space, puff, chain 1, puff, and close it off with a double crochet. Now once we have this row completed, we're going to chain 3, flip our work. We're going to puff, chain 1, puff. Now from here, we don't have any more of these loops to work into the middle, so we're going to just chain 1, 2, 3. And working across into that next chain space in between our puffs, we're going to puff, chain 1, puff, then close it off with a double crochet per usual. Then from here, we're going to chain 3, flip our work, puff, chain 1, puff per usual. Then once we have that, chain 1, skipping across into that next chain space in between our puffs, we're going to close it off with our second puff. So puff, chain 1, puff, double crochet into the last. Now we're going to do our last row, so we're going to chain 3 and flip. And now we're going to do our puff, chain 1, puff, but into that middle chain space. We're no longer going to be working in between our puff stitches. So yarn over, into that middle chain space, we're going to puff, chain 1, puff. And now that that middle puff stitch is completed, 1 double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row. Now what we're going to do from here is do a chain up 1 and cut. So we are back. Now that our pineapple is completed, we're going to even out the edges, and then we can get started on the length of our piece. So first things first, we're going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch of our pineapple stitch detail, and we're going to pull through. What we're going to do is put 2 stitches into every side row that we have. Now into the top 2 edge stitches, it's going to be the same on this side. We're going to start with double crochets and half double crochets because we want this to kind of form more of a triangle, whereas right now these top rows kind of curve inward a little bit. So we're all going to start with a chain 3. That chain 3 doesn't count as a stitch. We just want the height. And into our first side row, we're going to insert with 2 double crochets. So starting with the yarn over, into that first side row, insert with 1 double crochet. Into that same side row with a second double crochet. Now this is my following side row. We're now going to do 2 half doubles. So yarn over, pull through 3, and again into that same side row with another half double. Then from here, 2 single crochets into every side row. So this is my following side row, insert with 1, same side row with 2. Again, this is my next side row, insert with 1, insert with 2. Then continue doing this, making our way all the way down until we're worked into our last side row. So we've just made our way all the way down with our evening out row. Before we start working into the top of that last pineapple stitch row, we do need to make sure that the amount of stitches that we currently have is in multiples of 3. If it's not, go ahead and add that extra stitch or 2 that you guys need into this last side row. And once we have that, we're all going to form a point into the top of that last pineapple stitch row. So for everyone, since we all should have ended with just 4 stitches, into that first stitch we're going to insert with 1 single crochet. Into that following stitch is going to be 1 half double crochet, and we all need to have a middle stitch as well. That middle stitch is going to be a double crochet to form the point, and it is going to be worked into that same stitch that our half double crochet is worked into, and make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of that stitch. Then once we have that, into that following stitch, it's going to be 1 half double crochet, into that following stitch, a single crochet. Then working our way back down this side of our pineapple, again 2 single crochet into every side row. Into that second to last side row is going to be 2 half double. Last side row is going to be 2 double crochets. And as a really quick tip, we should have the same amount of stitches on both sides of the stitch marker. So if you guys needed to add an extra stitch or 2 on this side, you are going to add an extra stitch or 2 on this side as well. We are back. Our single crochet row along the edge of our pineapple detail is complete. From here, we're going to get started on the length. So first things first, we're going to want to place this up to ourselves. Placing this first top row of our pineapple stitch detail that we have right where we'd like the depth of our neckline to be. Now you can make this as high or as low as you'd like. I'd like for mine to be just a little bit higher, roughly mid-chest. So I'm going to then, from my stitch marker stitch, make a chain the length that we'd like for the top to be. Now you can make this as long or as short as you'd like. I'd like for mine to be a crop top, so I'm going to start by making a chain 20, and that's roughly 4 inches or 10 centimeters. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and start with a chain 2. Now that chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain. Then yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet, and into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, insert with a half double. So insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3, and continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. So we are back. We made our way all the way up with our half double crochets. Into that last chain, we're all going to insert with 4 half doubles. So yarn over, and to do our increase, we're going to insert with 1, same last chain with 2, same last chain with 3, same last chain with 4 half double crochets for an increase of 4. Now we're going to slip stitch it into the base. Now just for this first row, it's going to be connected a little bit differently. So what we're going to do is just make sure that our work is flipped right side up, meaning we're looking at the top of our single crochet row, and we're all going to connect to the right. So just find that next available stitch and insert with a slip stitch, and that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row, so slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding that last stitch from our previous row, not working into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook. Again, next stitch is back loop, yarn over, pull through everything. We want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. Just continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the end of the row. We just made our way down with our second row. Now let's get started on our third, so chain 2 and flip. Now it's going to be 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. So yarn over, into that first stitch is back loop, insert with a back loop half double, and continue with 1 back loop half double into every stitch, leaving the last one. So our row 3 is nearly complete. We should all have 1 stitch left. Into that last stitch, another increase of 4 back loop half double crochets. So into that last stitch with 1 half double, same last stitch with a second, same last stitch with a third, same last stitch with a fourth. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So how we're going to connect this half double crochet row into the base from here on out is we're going to count up the next 2 available stitches, because our half double crochet row is a little tall. There's 1, there's 2. Into that second stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work, and then a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. Then from here, continue to repeat those 2 previous rows until we're worked into our last stitch along the top. Then I'll meet you guys back. We are back, and we've made our way all the way up, and we have worked into our last stitch along the edge of our pineapple stitch detail. Now from here, we're going to get started on our neckline. So we all should have ended right after a slip stitch row, so along the bottom. What we're all going to do from here is chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving that last stitch, then we'll do an increase together. So we've made our way up with our half double. What we're going to do from here is yarn over, And into that last stitch, all we're going to do is an increase of 2 back loop half double crochets just to get a nice scoop for our neckline. Then our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases, so pretty much the same as all of our other ones. So chain 1, flip our work, 1 back loop slip into every stitch. From here, for the neckline, we're going to continue to repeat those 2 previous rows. So all that's going to be is a back loop half double crochet row that ends on an increase of 2, then a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases until we get a neckline the width that we would like, making sure that we place our pineapple stitch detail at mid-chest. Then I'll meet everyone back right after a half double crochet row, then we can get started on the strap together from there. So we are back. I have just completed my neckline rows. Now, just counting my neckline rows, I have a total of 3 rows, or my total width is roughly 5.5 inches or 9 centimeters. Now from here, since we all should have ended along the top right after a half double crochet row, we're now going to make a chain that reaches up to the top of our shoulder. So placing our pineapple stitch detail, the top row right where we'd like for the neckline to sit, so higher or lower depending up to you, then go ahead and make your chain. Now, as you guys can see, I've already went ahead and made my chain. I need roughly 4 inches or 10 centimeters, so I made a chain 20. Now we can get started on our following row, which is going to be a slip stitch row. Start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're all going to insert with a slip stitch. Then from here, put 1 slip stitch into every chain. When you reach the body, 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then I'll meet you back. We are back. We've just made our way down with our first shoulder row, which is a slip stitch row. Now all we're going to do for the shoulders is back loop half double and back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases until we have a portion that can reach over to the corner of our underarm. So from where we're at, since we're along the bottom, chain 2, flip our work. Put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and then 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. I'll meet you back when we have that shoulder portion completed right after slip stitch row. Alright, so we are back. We have just completed our shoulder portion. Now, I have a total of 22 rows now. My width is roughly 4.5 inches or 11 centimeters. That is unstretched, because remember, it does have a decent amount of stretch to it. And now from here, we're going to get started on our underarm. So first things first, we're all going to put this up to ourselves, and we're going to insert our stitch marker into the stitch that's closest to the corner of our underarm. So I inserted my stitch marker into the 30th stitch from the top. That's roughly 6 inches or 15 centimeters. And since we should all be along the bottom, we're going to put 1 half double crochet into every back loop, leaving 2 stitches right before our stitch marker. So we've made our way up with our back loop half double crochet row. We should have left 2 stitches right before our stitch marker. Now we're going to do a decrease. So yarn over into that next stitch's back loop, pull through. Next stitch's back loop, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through 4. Our following row is going to be a slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases, so chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then just to do the decrease row together once more, at the end of our slip stitch row, chain 2, flip our work. Put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches. We've just completed our slip stitch row and also made our way back up with our back loop half doubles, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now just to do our decrease together once more, yarn over. Into that second to last, pull through, into that last, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4. From here, we're going to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have a portion that can reach all the way over to mid underarm, and the last row should be a half double crochet row for everyone. Now as a sizing tip, we do want to make sure that we're placing our pineapple stitch right at mid chest, but once we have that completed, do a chain up 1 and cut right after that last row, half double crochet like I said, then I'll meet you back to get started on the other side. We are back. My underarm portion is complete. I now have a total of 29 rows. My width is roughly 6 inches or 15 centimeters, unstretched, and I did do a chain up 1 and cut right after my last row. Now from here, we're going to get started on the other side of our front panel. Our ribbing isn't reversible, so it's going to be the same idea, but not done exactly the same. So what we're going to do now is insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of the base chain that we made. You're going to pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch. Then from here, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. We've made our way up with our back loop slip stitches, and now we're going to connect it into the base. Now just for this first row, we're going to slip stitch it into that same stitch that our stitch marker's in, or if you took out your stitch marker, it's going to be that same stitch that our chain is coming out of. So insert into that chain with a slip stitch that's just to connect. Then we're going to get started on the first half double crochet row. So what we're going to do is slip stitch up the following 2 stitches into the base. So there's 1, into that next stitch, there's my second. Now none of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch, and now we're going to flip our work and into that first stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches into the base. Start with an increase of 4 back loop half doubles, so yarn over, into that first stitch with 4 back loop half doubles, so there is 1, there is 2, there's 3, and there's 4, all into that same first stitch. And from here, continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. At the end of that row, just so we can connect it into the base together once more, chain 1, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the base. So we've just made our way all the way back up with our back loop slip stitches. Now we're going to connect it into the base together once more. So just like the previous row, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base. Doesn't actually count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into the next 2 stitches into the base. There's 1, there's 2, flip our work, and start with an increase of 4 back loop half double crochets, and that's it. Put 1 back loop half double crochet into the rest of our stitches. From here, continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, and then I'll meet you back so we can get started on the neckline. We are back. We have just completed the first half of this side of our front panel. We're worked into our last stitch. Now everyone's last row should have been a back loop slip stitch row. My total width is roughly 9 inches or 23 centimeters. Now from here we're going to do our few neckline rows. Since we're all along the top, we're going to start with a chain 2 and flip. Now since we're along the top, our half double crochet rows are going to start with an increase of 2. What we're going to do is yarn over. We're going to make sure that we're not working into that slip stitch into the base, but into the last stitch from our previous row with an increase of 2 back loop half double crochets, and put 1 back loop half double into every stitch. The following row is a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. Then continue to repeat those 2 rows until we have the same amount of rows as neckline rows that we have on this side. Once we have the same amount of rows, we should all end along the bottom. Once we have that, I will meet you guys back so we can get started on the shoulder. We are back. My neckline is complete. Now from here, we're all going to do the shoulder portion. Now since we all should have ended along the bottom, what we're going to do is just pull out some slack, grab the other end of our yarn, and then make our chain. So start by inserting our hook into the top corner stitch of our neckline portion that we just completed, if I can find the stitch. Then start by making the same chain that we made that led up to our shoulder. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain of 20. So from here, I'm going to make a chain of 20 and cut. So we are back. I have just completed making my chain and did cut. Now from here, I'm going to reinsert my hook into my slack that I left myself and get started on the following shoulder row. So from where we're at, chain 1, flip our work. We're going to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then once we reach our chain, 1 slip stitch into every chain. Then our following rows are going to be back loop half double and back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases for the same amount of rows that we have for this shoulder portion. We should also have the same amount of stitches as well. Once we have the same amount of rows, we should all end along the top. So do a chain of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you guys back so we can do our underarm portion together. So we are back. Our shoulder portion is complete, and we're going to finish this up with our underarm. Now just to let you guys know, the total width that I have is roughly 10.5 inches or 27 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, since we all should have ended along the top, we're going to do a chain up 1 and cut. Then we're going to start by inserting our stitch marker into the same amount of stitches that we inserted into on this side. So for those of you that have my numbers, I inserted it into the 30th stitch from the top. So I did the same thing on this side, and we're going to be inserting our hook into the stitch that's nearest to our stitch marker, but working down towards the bottom. So since this is my stitch marker stitch working down towards the bottom, I'm going to insert my hook into that next available stitch, making sure it's within that back loop, and I'm going to insert my yarn onto my hook. I'm going to pull through and start with a chain 2, but that chain 2 doesn't actually count as a stitch. We just need the height. And now we're going to start with a decrease of 2 back loop half doubles. So yarn over. Starting with that same stitch that our chain 2 is in, we're going to insert, pull through. Next stitch is back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4. Then complete this row with 1 half double crochet into every stitch. Then at the end of the row, chain 1, flip your work, and make your way back up with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then from there, continue to repeat those 2 rows. So just as a refresher, the following half double crochet row is going to start with a decrease of 2, 1 back loop half double into the rest of the stitches, then a back loop slip stitch row for the same amount of underarm rows that we have on the other side. Once we have the same amount of rows, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and I'll meet you back to get started on the back. We are back, and I've just completed the entirety of our front panel. Now my total width is roughly 12 inches or 30 centimeters unstretched. Now we're going to get started on our back panel. So getting started on our back panel, we're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we have for our last underarm row. So for those of you that have my numbers, I needed to make a chain of 29. So I'm going to make a chain of 29, but I actually already have this portion of my back panel completed, so I'm just going to be doing a small sample size with you. So now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then we're all going to yarn over into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook. We're going to insert with a half double crochet, so pull through 3, and continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain until we all have just 1 left. Now that we've made our way down with our half double crochet row, we should all have 1 chain left. Into that last chain, we're all going to do just an increase of 2, so there's 1 half double, into that same last chain with a second half double crochet. Now the following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row, so chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now that we've put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work, and repeat. But all the rows now are going to be within the back loops. So just get started on our row 3, yarn over, inserting your hook into that first stitch's back loop with a half double crochet, then continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one, and into that last one we're all just going to do an increase of 2 back loop half doubles. So we're at the end of our row 3. We should all have just 1 stitch left, so all we're going to do is an increase of 2 back loop half doubles. Like I said, we're going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we now have a portion that can reach from mid underarm over until we're about an inch away from the side of the base of our neck. Then I'll meet you back right after a half double crochet row, then we get started on the width of our back panel. So we are back, and my underarm portion for my back panel is complete. Now I have a total of 13 rows. This width is roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters. Now from here, since we all should have ended along the top right after a half double crochet row, we're all going to make a chain that reaches all the way up to the top of our shoulders. Now we do want to make sure that when we're measuring this chain that the front panel is on us as well, just to make sure that we don't make this chain too long or too short, because it does need to attach to the front panel as well. So I went ahead and already measured mine out. I need roughly 4 inches or 10 centimeters, so I went ahead and made a chain 21. So using my small sample size, once we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, go ahead and insert with a slip stitch. From here, continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. Then once we reach the body, 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then the following row is going to be a back loop half double crochet row with no increases and no decreases. Then just repeat our back loop half double, back loop slip stitch row, again with no increases and no decreases, until we have a portion that can reach across our back until we're roughly 1 inch away from the other side of the base of our neck. Then I'll meet you back right after a slip stitch row so we can complete our second underarm together. Now just to let you guys know, I already have my width completed. I have a total of 40 rows. This width is roughly 8.5 inches or 22 centimeters unstretched. What we're all going to do from here is our underarm. It is going to be done pretty much the same way as the first underarm for the front panel, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. We're all going to start by inserting our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led all the way up to our shoulder, only counting for the back panel. So since I made a chain of 21, on this side I'm going to count down 21 and insert my stitch marker. Then once our stitch marker is into place, we're going to half double crochet all the way up until we have 2 stitches left right before our stitch marker. Then into those last 2 stitches, we're going to do a decrease of 2 back loop half doubles. So insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4. Then our following row is going to be a slip stitch row, so chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip into every stitch. Then just continue to repeat those 2 rows until we have the same amount of underarm rows as the first underarm section that we had for the back panel. When we have the same amount of rows, do a chain of 1 and cut, and I'll meet you back. We are back. The entirety of my back panel is complete. I have a total of 11.5 inches or 29 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, we're going to seam it together to the front panel. So go ahead and place the front panel on top of our back panel, making sure that the ribbing on both panels is faced outward. Once our panels are on top of each other, we're then going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back. We're going to pull our working yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam to make it look like another slip stitch row. So finding that first available stitch into the front panel, insert only in through that front loop. Next available stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back loop, then yarn over, pull through everything. Again. Next stitch into that front panel, insert in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert in through that back loop. Yarn over, pull through all 3, and continue this till we don't have any more stitches left. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and repeat on the other side. So we are back. We have just completed seaming up both of our sides. Now we're going to seam up our shoulder. So first things first, for the shoulder, we're going to make sure the work is flipped wrong side out, meaning the seams that we just did are now along the inside. Then insert your hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Pull your working yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then from here, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row, 2 single crochet into every side half. So getting that started together, everyone's first side row within the front panel should be a side slip stitch row, so find that top loop and insert. First side row within the back panel should be another side slip stitch row, so find that top loop and insert. And we're going to single crochet everything together, and if you don't want to weave in your tail ends later, I'm just going to lay my tail ends over my hook and single crochet around everything. Let's do our next side row. Should be a side half for everyone, so find that next top loop, insert into that front panel. Next side row within the back, find that top loop, which should be a side half as well. We're going to single crochet once, and then a second single crochet into that same top loop. So in through both the front panel and the back panel at the same time. It should be easier since everything's already gathered, and single crochet. That's it. We're going to continue doing that till we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, repeat on the other side. So now that we have just finished seaming everything, we're now going to single crochet along our neckline to make it clean. So first things first, making sure the work is flipped right side up, we're going to insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have on the back of our neckline. Then just put 2 single crochet into every side half double crochet row, skipping over our side slip stitch rows. So start by pulling through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Into our first side half double crochet row, this is mine right here, I'm going to find that top loop and start with just 2 single crochets. So there's 1 into that same top loop with a second single crochet. Skip over our following side slip stitch row and into our next side half. Insert with 2 single crochets again. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way across. Once we reach the front panel, 1 single crochet into every stitch, then we should have some side rows to work into as well. 2 single crochet into every side half double crochet row, no single crochets into the side slip stitch rows as well. Then don't forget we have the side row along the edge of our pineapple stitch detail. Then 1 single crochet into every stitch. Continue this, making our way all the way up and around, then slip stitch into that chain space and do a chain up 1 and cut. So we are back. We have just completed single crocheting along the entirety of our neckline. Now from here, we're going to single crochet along our armholes as well. So first things first, making sure that our work is flipped right side up, we're going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam within our armhole. Then this is going to be pretty simple. We're going to be putting 2 single crochets into every side half double. We are still skipping over every side slip stitch row, and then 1 single crochet into every stitch all the way up and around. Then continue with 2 single crochets into every side half double, make our way back down. Then slip stitch into that chain space and repeat on the other side. We are back. We have just completed single crocheting along our armholes as well. Now the last thing we're going to do is our bottom band. So what we're going to do is make sure the work is flipped right side up, insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom, and simply put 2 single crochets into every side half double crochet row, skipping over our side slip stitch rows. Make your way all the way around, then slip stitch into that chain space. Now just as a really quick tip, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch, so once when it's completed, try your piece on. If it's a little too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip. If it's a little too loose, reduce some stitches with a tighter grip. Then I'll meet you back. We've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row. We don't have any more side rows left to work into, so now we have slip stitched into that chain space. We're now going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the bottom band to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 10. Now that we have our chain, block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a slip stitch, and since we already know how to do our slip stitches, continue on with putting 1 slip stitch into every chain, remembering not to tug too tightly after every stitch. We put 1 slip stitch into every chain, now we're going to connect it into the base. So just finding that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. That doesn't count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch in the base. Still doesn't count as a stitch, and flip our work. Then from here, put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, starting with that first stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches into the base. So now that first stitch is back loop, yarn over, gently pull through everything, and continue with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain one, flip our work, and make your way back up, putting one back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. So we've made our way back down, and we should all have a total of 3 rows. Now we're just going to connect it into the base. So finding that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. That slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then, just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work, and repeat. From here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we have made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we are going to seam it up, but as you can see, I have already seamed mine together. So just to talk you guys through it, we're going to make sure the work is slipped right side out, right side up. Then we're all going to do the same seam that we did for the sides. So do the same outside loop slip stitch seam that we did, then do a chain up 1 and cut when we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, we are all done. The last thing I have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!